You want to do it now? Oh, fantastic. Guys, let me tell you something. Angelo Cataldi comes on the program every week, and we're proud to get Angelo on with us. And I asked him about Marcus Hayes, and I'm like, we get a lot of crap from the Eagles, and my bosses get a lot of crap. They try firing me almost every other week because of some of the things I say, because I'm critical of the way that they've drafted on defense. They didn't like it. So I read Marcus Hayes because he writes with a pen that has no fear. And when you're in a city like this, that's scary. Okay? But you have to be that way. That's why people read him. I love his work. And I've been trying to get him on here for a little bit from the Inquirer. I'm glad he popped in. Let's do it now. Marcus Hayes, how you doing, man?
Hey, man. Thank you for having me. Can you hear me?
I sure can. I got you, man. I jumped the gun as always. I'm always there ahead of time here, but I'm glad you can do this now here, man. Thank you so much. I admire your work.
Oh, thank you. I was just checking. I got a new computer, so not everything has transferred from the old computer. So this is the first, I think it's StreamYard that I've done with this computer. So I was just checking to make sure it would work. I was supposed to be on, I think, 5:30 or something like that. So I figured that would give me and Xander enough time to figure out my mistakes. But I haven't made any. So in a huge upset.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, when it comes to computer stuff, I have no idea what I'm doing. And my daughter teaches me everything about computer stuff. She's like, somebody told me the other day, she's like, Dad, when you're being bombarded, that's a good thing. I'm like, really? I thought when I'm being raided, that's good. She's like, yeah. So I'm learning so much stuff here. All right, let's get on to the team here. I mean, Marcus, what do you learn so far about the 2-1 Eagles out of the gate? Green Bay, Atlanta, obviously the Saints game this past weekend. What have you learned so far about this 2-1 Eagle team?
Well, the most important thing, and it's a positive thing, is that the offensive line is just as good as it was last year. It's really, really good. And it's deep because they had two backups come in emergency service, and they didn't lose a beat. They were really good. The second thing I've learned is that there's a lot left with Brandon Graham, who can play defensive end and do a little bit of defensive tackle, and that when he wants to, Jalen Carter, the defensive tackle, the first-round pick from last year, can be a game wrecker. He can just destroy two guys, 3 or 4 times a game. And that's the stuff that Aaron Donald did. That's the stuff that Fletcher Cox did. So those are the two biggest positives. The thing that I'm a little bit surprised about is that Jalen Hurts seems to be making the same mistakes that he made last year that limited what the Eagles could do. He wasn't the biggest problem. Last year, the biggest problem was Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, the other first-round defensive tackle. They ran out of gas about 2/3 of the way through the season. That was they could win with Jalen Hurts. They couldn't win because they couldn't stop the run. They couldn't penetrate up the middle. But the fact that Jalen Hurts doesn't seem to have kind of learned the lesson that you need to learn in your third or fourth year, in that it doesn't have to be all you all the time. And you don't get multiple chances to make a mistake. You almost have to, you can't, quarterbacks and starting pitchers are the most powerful people in sports because they can lose games for you. They can give games away. And a quarterback more so than a starting pitcher. So he's given opportunities away with bad decisions, not bad throws, but bad decisions. And I'm surprised that that's happened. So those are my 3 big takeaways so far.
I'm going to ask you a question here on a topic that we had. And, if you go back to when he got his contract into the start of the 2023 year, he's 13-8. He's got 26 turnovers. And if you look at it and you put the numbers aside, not that I think Baker Mayfield is some sort of superstar quarterback, but Baker Mayfield has outplayed him. I mean, Mayfield is 12-10. He's got a playoff win against him. He's thrown for 4,100 yards. He had 28 TDs. Right now, he's 6-2 when it comes to quarterbacks to interceptions. I mean, when you look at it here, here's the question. Has Jalen Hurts, in your opinion, gotten better as a quarterback since he signed that $250 million deal?
He's gotten better in one aspect, and it's recent, and it's recognizing and beating the blitz. He's gotten worse in understanding what he can't do. He can't outrun most linebackers, and he can't outrun any defensive backs. When you learn that, you start to throw the ball away or take a sack or whatever. Those are the turnover issues we're talking about. Trying to do too much. I think he's been sacked 6 or 8 times
Yep.
also.
Yep.
And they aren't like bad. They're not offensive line sacks. That's the thing. It's and we've seen this before. We've seen, quarterback Brett Favre. He reminds me more of Brett Favre right now than anybody else. And it's really unfair because Brett Favre had the capacity to throw 40 or 50 touchdown passes. He had a great arm. He had a better understanding of the game, I think, than Jalen has. But he also lost a lot of games. He lost as many games as he won. And that was the big difference between Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers would go 2 months without throwing an interception. So, I think he reminds me more of Russell Wilson than anybody else. But Russell Wilson's football IQ was just maybe the best since Steve Young that I've seen. And he reminds, those are guys that remind me of Jalen Hurts and vice versa. Mobile guys who need to make the right decision and know what they can't do. And the more he learns what he can't do, the better quarterback he'll be.
Marcus, do you think he's a product of the roster? Because when I look at him now, outside of the fourth quarter in New Orleans, I thought he was better. And this is going to sound nuts. When Devontae was off the field because he had to spread it around more, he found Dallas Goedert rolling across the middle. Now, that's going to be a one of maybe. But to me, sometimes when you look at players, like look at Allen. Now, again, their schedule has been soft. He's performed well. He's got a tough one coming up this weekend against the Ravens. We'll find out a little more if he can win without Stephon Diggs in that game versus, say, the Jags. But How much do you look at Hurts going, I mean, when he misses a couple players on that team, that offense just falls to pieces at times, and it just doesn't look the same. How much is he a benefactor of that?
Well, we all use crutches, right? I'll tell you, like, one of my bugaboos is I'll fixate on a word for 6 months. Like one baseball season, this guy I was writing baseball with, he we read each other's stuff, see if we get beat or whatever. He's like, you got to start using the word diminished, I think it was. I was like, you're right. I used it like 500 times that season. So we all have crutches. And Jalen's crutch is A.J. Brown. It just is. That's his guy. That's the guy he trusts. The genius behind Aaron Rodgers, the genius behind Tom Brady, the genius behind whoever, Donovan. Donovan was actually pretty good at it because he had to be, is that you spread the ball around. And that amplifies everything, but it also amplifies the effectiveness of your big play guys. Once you like, my greatest criticism of Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts since they've been together is Dallas Goedert should be a top 3 tight end. And he isn't because they choose to make him not so. And I know he's missed some time, but Dallas Goedert should be getting 6-7 targets a game. He's special. He's really, really good. He had 10 catches for 170 yards. That's been done twice since 2020 by Travis Kelce, who's the best receiving tight end, maybe the best all-around tight end ever. So that said, he needs to understand that the offense runs through him, but it has to run in more than one or two directions. So, yeah, he's a product, I think, of what they put around him every time they put stuff around him. And I think it's okay to understand that you're the 7th best player on that offense. If you think about it, both receivers are better at receiver than he is at quarterback. The running back this year, and maybe with Miles Sanders, was better than he was at quarterback. Lane Johnson clearly is better. Landon Dickerson went to a Pro Bowl. Jordan Mailata might be better. And when Jason Kelce was there, he was better. So he was the 7th or 8th best player on offense at quarterback. So certainly he's a product of that, but that doesn't mean he's bad. I think he's really good. It just means that the offense should be unstoppable. It should be spectacular. And, you only go as far as your quarterback takes you. And when your quarterback understands how the offense is supposed to work and runs it properly, and you have all those weapons and protection, it should be great. I forgot about Dallas Goedert, my guy. Yeah. He might be the 8th or 9th best player on his own offense, and he's really good.
Is Nick Sirianni a product of the roster? Because, I hear people saying this all the time to me. And I got into a back and forth on X today with Jason Kelsey. He was talking to me about, and I don't know if you agree with this or not, and I'll say it and I'll paraphrase it here. I was like, he was talking about how he's a great motivator in the locker room. He's a great team speech guy. And I was like, Jason, you don't need a team speech guy, Newt Rockney speeches. What you need is an in-game decision maker and a guy who's not going to get in the way of his coaches on game day and parachute in and make some sort of half-assed decision in critical moments, like in red zone or going for points on the road when you have half your team or not a star. And I get he's going to be a company guy with that. But I look at Nick Sirianni and go, I look at him and I don't know. I just don't see a qualified guy as the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. There's nothing redeeming about him that I like that makes me go, that guy is a guy you look to, Marcus, when things go rough, and he's a problem solver. Head coaches have to be problem solvers, and I don't see that.
Jeffrey Lurie has 3 times he's hired vastly underqualified guys. Andy Reid was not qualified to be a head coach when he got hired. Doug Peterson wasn't qualified. Neither was Nick. But they were all capable of being a head coach. Not a great head coach, maybe, but being a head coach. And one of the biggest mistakes I made as a younger reporter was being so critical so early of Andy and Donovan. Both of those guys were rookies. Nick's a rookie. This is his first job. Doug's a rookie. This is his first job. Things aren't going great in Jacksonville right now, and that's kind of surprising to me, but he did well, So I think we need to give these guys a little bit of grace. And for coaches, it's as much grace as the quarterback. Because once Andy figured it out, and he had to figure it out, he's the best coach in the NFL since then. He's just spectacular. I don't know if Nick's going to have that kind of learning curve. I really thought that it was a huge mistake for him to act the way he acted last year, especially in the tunnel in Kansas City after beating them, taunting the fans. That, to me, does more harm to the team and the sort of culture that he's trying to build than any good, than any Newt Rockney speech. All of that diminishes the respect that he might be building up. But I will say this, in Jason's defense, I didn't see your X exchange with him. In his defense, these guys really like playing football for Nick. Football, as you know, is hard to play, especially in the Northeast, especially in a town like Philly. I'm talking about Northeast weather and hyper-focused, hyper-critical fans and media base. Nick does a pretty good job of taking bullets. He does a pretty good job of staying positive. He does a pretty good job of communicating. He doesn't do the perfect job. And you are preaching to the choir when it comes to the fourth down stuff. I was looking at the fourth downs that have failed and the decision, and to me, the most egregious one was Atlanta, right?
Yeah.
I think it was 4th and 4. And I think they were down 3-0, something like that. Whatever it was, that was just, you kick it right there. AJ's out. That's the other thing with Nick. Like, he thinks that all things are equal with analytics. All things aren't equal. If you have 2 offensive linemen and 2 receivers out, then you have to play conservatively. You can't expect your team to function the way that they function with, 3 of your better players out, and Lane Johnson and both receivers. So I see both sides of it. I agree with you more than Jason. Nick should be a better X's and O's coach and decision maker coach, but he does have value as a rah-rah guy. And the most remarkable thing I've ever seen in sports, and I've seen 34 years of it right now, and covering big league. The first time I ever covered was Buffalo Bills. So I've been in it since I got in it. Nick Sirianni, as a rookie head coach, gave up play calling 3 or 7 games into his first season. That could be suicidal. Like, he may never get another offensive coordinator job after that. So that, to this day, carries a lot of weight with these players. And he's been consistent. And he is who he is. You are who you are. I am who I am. That's why people like us, people like him and play for him because he's authentic and he's consistent. I think sometimes the players give that too much weight, like maybe Jason did. And the X's and O's things, I think we have to let him breathe a little bit, let him live a little bit, because he's never really had to do it without A.J. Brown, who's consistently been the best player on his roster for the last 3 seasons.
So, Marcus, you're putting him on the Mike Shanahan scale learning scale where Mike was atrocious with the Raiders. He was just an absolute awful coach with the Raiders. He couldn't get out of his own way. He goes to Denver and he wins back-to-back world championships, and he learns a little bit. Now, it helps you have the other guy in the building, and you have Terrell Davis.
Right.
So I get all that, but still, he understood that Elway was past his time and it had to be a running attack. So you bring Alex Gibb in, you kind of formulate your own kind of way of going about business.
Yep.
So you're saying again here that, he's in the same scale and he's on the same kind of evaluation scale of Jalen.
I don't know if he has the ceiling of Mike Shanahan. Mike Shanahan was special. Mike Shanahan was very hard to deal with. Yep. And, I don't know if you know, but he made Adam Schefter. Him and Terrell Davis made Adam Schefter. Yeah. So he was Mike Shanahan operator. He used to manipulate the injury reports and all that sort of stuff. He was a different guy. He was a lot like Belichick. He didn't win like Belichick, but he also didn't have Brady like Belichick. Belichick wasn't good in his first act,
Right.
But I don't know if Nick has that ceiling. But I will say I've been pretty impressed with his consistency, with his energy, with his commitment, with his knowledge. We get a chance once or twice a week to sort of just chat with him, and he knows what he's talking about. Like, he knows football. He knows why he's questioned for doing certain things. He believes in certain things, and he'll admit I screwed that up, and he's really good about that. He's good about that. Who else is really good about that? Nick Nurse is pretty good about that. And Nick Nurse won a title when he had a good player in Kawhi Leonard. Doc Rivers wasn't good at that. He wasn't good at saying, I screwed this up. Nick is pretty good at saying, I screwed this up.
Tortorella.
And he does, right, exactly. And Nick will out himself, the coordinators, as well as the players when the team meets. Most head coaches don't say, and this is how I screwed this up. When we were coaching it last week, I didn't tell Jalen that if you look the safety off and he turns his hips, then you can go back to the guy you looked him off for. Something like that. That's not exactly what happened, but those are the types of things that happen in team meetings with Nick. And to Jason's point, that carries a lot of weight. And I think that he has a pretty high ceiling. I don't know what it's going to be like when it comes to crunch time. Because crunch time is different. We've seen Pete Carroll not give the ball to Marshawn Lynch at the 1 because the analytics said, it's only going to work 1 out of 4 times. Well, he had 4 chances,
Well, that leads into an interesting point here. So let's just say Kellen Moore gets Jalen turned around. He's playing spectacular football. He's back to being his MVP caliber type player by the end of the year. You're going to allow him to walk out the room and have another coordinator next year. Here we go with the conveyor belt of new coordinators. I've said this, come win or lose, Jalen Hurts is going to have a new coordinator in 2025 because somebody will be the fall guy for the organization, like Brian Johnson, who's, by the way, doing a heck of a job with Cliff Kingsbury with Jaden Daniels right now. That looks like a pretty good little marriage going on there because everyone knows the success that he has, that means that everyone's going to look at Nick and go, well, you said last year that was your offense, so that's your to blame for that. And everyone's going to be going, we should hire Kellen Moore as the head coach. Now, I don't know what the organization will do. Will you allow another guy like Shane Steichen to walk out the building to get another head coaching job? Or are you going to really retain Nick Sirianni? If Jalen has success, isn't that the end of Nick? Or do they not and let him roll and get him another coordinator?
Well, that's a Jeffrey Lurie question, right? Jeffrey Lurie hates to admit he's wrong. The reason Nick is still the coach here is because Jeffrey Lurie didn't admit he was wrong. It was Nick last year. Nick was the problem. And Jeffrey Lurie said, you know what? We're going to give it another go. We're going to change the parameters, and we're going to give it another go. So, no, I think if Kellen wins, Kellen walks, and they try to find another Kellen. But Jeffrey Lurie, he was, as much as he was criticized for hiring a quarterbacks coach who was not allowed to talk to the media and was untouchable in Green Bay because Mike Holmgren was scared of losing Andy Reid, as much as criticism he took for that, he's taken way more criticism for hiring Nick Sirianni. And Jeffrey has to be smart. He has to be smarter than you. He is a PhD. He has to be smarter than you. And if he fires Nick, after not firing him last year, if he fires Nick, then he's admitting he's wrong. And I like Jeffrey, and I think he's sometimes snowblind to this, but he does tend to hire pretty good. He tends to hire coaches that win. You
He's
know,
never had a losing coach since he's been the owner of the team, or since 2000.
yeah,
Even Chip Kelly's had a winning record. I mean,
yeah.
so there is something to be said with that. But again, how do you develop a quarterback with 5 different coordinators since Jalen took over the job? Think about it. It was first Nick, then it went to Shane Steichen, then it went to Brian Johnson. Then you have right now Kellen. You move on, you're going to have 5 coordinators in 4 years of starting, going into his 6th year or his 5th year starting. And I got to think, I mean, how do you look at Mahomes, 10 years with Andy? Look at Jordan Love, what he's going to get. He's going to get Matt LaFleur all them years. Look at Purdy. Purdy's going to have Kyle Shanahan for a long length of time. I think there's something about having a coordinator in the building that is going to be with you. How many years did Tom Moore stick with Peyton Manning? 10 years? He was there a decade, right? I
Well,
think that hurts his development a little bit, don't you, Marcus?
oh, absolutely. It's not great for the development of a quarterback who wasn't a very good quarterback
Correct.
when he got here. He's had to learn a lot of stuff. What they ran in Alabama, what they ran in Oklahoma, in what they like. Carson Wentz came in way better prepared. Like, you taking snaps under center, understanding route concepts and route trees and all that sort of stuff that he understood coming from North Dakota State. Jalen didn't know. Jalen still has trouble seeing things from under center, like just sort of recognizing what's in front of him. But yeah, it's a very, very fine, a very, very narrow landing strip to retain Kellen Moore and get rid of Nick Sirianni. I mean, I think the only way that happens is if Jalen goes forward and the team loses. If the team is like 10-7 and out in the playoffs, you can retain Kellen Moore, promote him, and say goodbye to Nick Sirianni. But if they win 12 games in a playoff game, you can't fire the head coach.
No way.
And if they win those games, Kellen's going to have done a good job, and he's finally going to get his shot at being a head coach.
Absolutely. A couple more here for you. You brought something up that drives me crazy. Please, all the years you covering it, help me, because I scream at the I get so upset with this. I am a big believer in analytics too, but I'm a believer in applied analytics.
Right.
Okay. You have an analytics page when you have your play sheets and you have what plays that you're going to run. Being a coordinator is a feel for the game. But in my opinion, having Frank Reich on the program a couple of years ago, he told me that the Eagles get a lot of their game plan from the analytics department. If you notice in the Eagle organization, Marcus, there's a trend. All those guys have been in that analytics department between 15 and 25 years. When you look at the coaching staff, I mean, the 10 years, they're 3 years, 4 years. These guys are constantly revolving, but the analytics department, who the son of the owner is involved with, so you get a page and you have all the analytics. To me, it just looks like you build your game plan off that analytics instead of having a true feel for the game, because some of those decision makings that they had, to me, it doesn't look like you're applying the analytics when needed. Like you said, you got half your team out. You're on the road. You don't have AJ. Your offense has been inconsistent. The quarterback since 2023 to start has 26 turnovers. He's maybe not playing the best. He's best when he's on the move, and he's best when he's playing like 22. It just seems that they go off that sheet, and they're so aggressive to be aggressive. Doug Peterson was aggressive, but I think he was smart aggressive. When I see Nick, it just looks to me like, this is what we all talked about. I hear him say it in his press conference. We talk about this on Tuesday, Monday, and Wednesday, and I'm like, well, how do you apply that when you're on 4th down and then you go for a 60-yard field? How are you applying those analytics like that? Tell me how that whole thing works in your opinion with that organization, because it drives me crazy. I don't see a rhythm, or it just doesn't seem to be in sync.
Well, if you remember 11 years ago here, they hired a guy named Sam Hinkie.
Absolutely.
And he would refer to actual players as assets. And once you dehumanize the player to a number or a concept, then you can no longer be in charge of players, because they're human beings. They're all human beings. So I believe Nick has the capacity to understand game feel. I think he has the capacity to understand like who's hot right then. Okay. I don't believe he has the confidence in himself to apply it. I think that the same things that upset you, the decisions that upset you, and the decisions that I roll my eyes at, in the moment, he's not fully convicted himself.
Is
He
that because of experience that
I
you
just
talk
think it's
about?
a personality thing. I
Okay.
really do. I think he thinks that I really need to go with these numbers. We have 20 people crunching numbers. We have our own, what do they call it? Uh their own brand of analytics, their own way of meshing the numbers and applying them. Proprietary, that's the word I'm looking for. They have a proprietary analytics system. Pretty much every team does. Vic Fangio says he has his own system that he doesn't even tell his assistants about. I think that he thinks, okay, all this work has been done and there's been so much success with it other places in general. How can I ignore this, even though I'm a pedigreed football guy from Western New York and it's all that mattered to me? And this, when I was 20 years old, would have been considered crazy. It's still kind of considered crazy, just not as crazy. And I think you just have to play to your strengths. The thing about analytics is it doesn't trust defenses. It operates independent of defenses. It operates independent of weather. It operates independent of
Momentum.
momentum. It operates somewhat independent of game site. There are, home versus away, but you can't tell me your analytics in Sao Paulo are the same as your analytics in South Philly. It's just a different environment. So I think he and you and I, if we were sitting around a table having beers, I think we'd be much more on the same page than when the lights are on and he's got that sheet and he knows what the three options are. He feels, okay, I'm safer if I choose this option because he doesn't want the wrath of football geek Twitter. He doesn't want the wrath of Monday morning quarterback TV shows. He doesn't want them showing the numbers where it was 11%. It was an 11% better gamble to throw the ball to Saquon Barkley than it was to kick the field goal. It was 89% to 100% you're going to win. Well, 89 is pretty good. And the 100% is only if the ball is caught. It doesn't take into account the fact that it might not be caught, might be bobbled, might get you the route might be cut, and it's pick six, right? So if you've got 100% here and 89% here, if the ball is caught versus kicking a field goal, if you fixate on those numbers, and he knows the cognoscenti is going to fixate on those numbers, and he's going to be an idiot, and maybe Jeffrey Lurie is going to come in after the game and point to those numbers and say, why didn't you do this? Maybe that's what's in his mind. But taking points off the board seems to be he seems to be more equipped to take points off the board this year than put them on.
See, to me, on that third down play, I'll tell you why I go the Belichick route. I'm not throwing that pass out there. Because like you say, and I've heard John McMullen say it, and I disagree with this. Well, he makes the catch, he takes it in. I'm not playing the player's ability. I'm playing the one loss, the ratio here. What is the worst thing that can happen in that moment? You give Atlanta another timeout when you do that. To me, my enemy at that moment wasn't my enemy wasn't the Falcons, it was the clock.
Right.
I wanted the clock to go down. If you run it, you run another. You could have done this, Marcus. You could have ran the ball, ran the 25 seconds off. Then you could have lined up on fourth down. You had another timeout left. And you could have ran it, called the timeout, ran another 15 seconds off the clock. You would have put them in an even tougher position to have to make a play for the end zone. I know, look, they went right down the field, but you would have given them lesser time. And from what I understand, when you're game planning with over a minute, there's a different mindset when you're going for the last second drive versus when you're at 50 seconds or 40 seconds going to try for a game-winning drive. For me, I'm taking the Belichick route. I'm taking the for sure thing. I'm getting the points. I'm killing the clock because I'm killing two stones with one rock here in this moment. That to me is what I'm talking about, a feel for the game. And you didn't have AJ. I mean, all of that plays into it. And so you have to think yourself through those moments, I think. And sometimes I just don't see it.
Well, again, I think you have to live them too. One of the things that
That's
you
great.
understand,
Yes.
one of the things that you understand that a bunch of our viewers probably don't understand is how fast it is on the sideline. A
Oh,
lot of
it's
guys,
this.
a lot of guys stay up in the booth. A lot of
Yep.
coordinators go up to the booth because
Yep.
it's slower in the booth than on the side. You don't have anybody yelling at you.
Yep.
It's quiet. You can think. All you hear is the headset. It's a much calmer environment than being on the field. Nick's on the field. Nick's yapping and he's listening to this guy and he's yelling at the ref and and that's the other thing about Nick. Like, I think he allows himself to be distracted on the field. If you think about the great, great coaches, Shula, Landry, Reed, Belichick, not Parcells, he was kind of a nut. Walsh. Nothing. They were in their bubble. They understood what was going on, but they did not let the moment carry them away. And very rarely are great coaches. There are a lot of really good coaches who are like that, but very rarely are really good coaches wild men. Very rarely. Marv Levy, who I think was a spectacular coach,
Look at Dungy. Look at how Dungy handled
Tony
himself.
Dungy. You didn't even you'd have thought Tony Dungy was coaching a fifth grade girls flag football game.
Never too high, never too low. He comes on the show all the time, and I love him from my time in Tampa with him. And one of the greatest things I'll ever hear somebody say, all these guys were talking, and John Lynch said this: they were 0-8, and they were in the locker room. This is when Dungy was turning the culture around. This shows you what you're saying here. He goes like this. He goes, Coach, we're 0-8, and he goes, see, you guys look at 0-8. I look at you. You're right here.
Mm-hmm.
You're this close. And it just brings a sense of confidence when you see a coach like that. Okay, coach, like Coach Tomlin is my favorite coach. You see a guy like that on the sidelines. I don't know if do you feel that way with Nick? When you look at Nick, does he exude confidence that he's going to win you a game?
I believe he gets swept up in the moment more than a coach should be swept up in the moment. Honestly, he and Jalen need to flip personalities. They need to Freaky Friday, That's what they need to do. Jalen needs to be more like Nick. Nick needs to be more like Jalen, because the antics, like the worst thing he did off the field was the tunnel thing. The worst thing he did on the field was he yelled at Hassan Reddick coming over to the sideline. Get the bleep back on the field. You can't talk to your worst player like that, much less a guy who's, setting sack records for the team. That to me, I don't know if you remember that instance, but if you see it, like if you go back and look at the film, look how Devontae Smith looks at Nick Sirianni in that moment. Devontae Smith, who was Nick Saban's guy, right?
Yeah.
That Jalen Hurts, also a Nick Saban guy, is thinking, what is this guy doing in this moment? This isn't what we need from him in this moment. We need the opposite of this in this moment. So, again, I think we gotten off the path here a little bit, but it'll be interesting to see how Nick comports himself on and off the field going forward. Like, he came off the field on Sunday loaded for bear. I called that 4th and 1 play. That was me. It wasn't Kellen Moore. So if there's any questions, yada, yada, yada. Monday, he's asked about that and other. I'm not going to talk about, every day, every time we talk, I'm not going to talk about my 4th down decisions. And I'm like, dude, that's your entire job. The only reason we're talking to you right now, we're not talking about kneeling for the flag. We're not talking about rules. We're not talking about complaints or officials. We're talking about actual play calls in the game that you are making. This is the only thing you can't not talk about. This is the only thing you have to talk about. This is it. You can BS us with injuries. You can deflect whatever you want to deflect. But if you make a play call, the reason you're having a press conference is to talk about the play call. That's it. That's your entire job as it relates to us. Personnel decisions and play calls. That's it. So I said that to say, I don't know that his nature is changing the way that it maybe needs to. The maturation level is changing, because that's just a silly thing to say. You
Yeah.
can't say, I know everybody's talking about these play calls that I'm telling you I made, but I'm not going to talk about them. I'm not going to talk about them every week. Yeah, you are. That's the only thing we want to talk about. That's the only reason you're having the press conference.
Finally, help me out on this one here. Man, you're awesome. I appreciate you doing this for me. Thank you for all the time here. And this last one here, I've said this. Tell me if I'm wrong, Marcus. I look at Howie Roseman and I look at how that organization builds defense. I went back in your history and I looked at the Eagles and I said, when's the last time they drafted an all-pro corner? It looks like they have a really nice guy right now. When's the time they've drafted in the last 5 years a Pro Bowl anybody over on defense? Look at the linebackers. The edge rushers are atrocious. Every time he needs something, he doesn't go into the draft because he fails. Nolan Smith looks like nothing. Then he goes out and does a project with Bryce Huff, who I said had 480 snaps last year, and he was a situational pass rusher. He's not a three-down guy. He'll never be a three-down guy. This is his 6th year in the league. You're not going to reinvent that. So I turn around and look at Howie and his job at tooling that side of the defense. And I say to you, Marcus, I mean, since when is that guy a personnel guy for defensive football players? Can you name me a guy in the last 5 years that you go like this? That guy's a really great football player that they've evaluated. Now, again, it looks like Quinyon can be that guy. He looks like he plays the role, and I'm pretty happy with where he is. But I don't see anything over on that side of the ball. And people will go, what about Jalen Carter? Well, what aggravated me about the game last week was that that's what he should be, not what he can be. And I want to see that in Green Bay, Atlanta, Tampa Bay. I want to see it like my old teammate and a guy who played like this, Jerome Brown. That's who I want to see. I want to see a guy like that. That aggravates me more than it does make me feel good, because that's what he should be. How do you look at Howie Roseman building that defense and how he has one? They're a top-heavy team. Offense, no defense.
You're right. Okay? You're right. He has a blind spot when it comes to defensive line drafting. Okay? And that's where they're going to spend the first picks on defense all the time. This year was an aberration where they've spent their first 2 picks on defensive backs. That said, they haven't been in a great situation to draft top defensive back, guys they thought were going to be top defensive backs, in a long time, because they've been pretty good. And those guys tend to go pretty high. Number one. Number two, I think we need to give Carter some grace. Jalen Carter needs some grace as well. He's played 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 NFL football games, and he's been pretty good in about 11 or 12 of them.
Yep.
It's not bad.
Agreed.
Okay? And trust me, Jerome wasn't, plug and play.
No.
He wasn't just add water. And he had a guy on his hip who was, I consider, the best defensive football player in history, in Reggie White. So,
and Buddy.
That's not to diminish Jerome.
And Buddy.
Fletcher Cox needed about 20, 25 games to get going. So we don't know about Jalen. But to your point, Josh Sweat should be better, especially if you're going to sign him to an extension. Nolan Smith has to contribute right away. Hassan Reddick was an absolute slam dunk home. Even if Hassan Reddick is only a 3rd-round pick for you the 3rd year, you got your money's worth out of Hassan Reddick. That's a great Howie home run.
30 sacks in 2 years, counting the playoffs. Come on now.
And, who's the guy that played next to Fletcher during the 70 sack year? Just got hurt in San Francisco. Defensive tackle.
Linville Joseph? Oh, no.
No.
Hargrave.
Yvonne
Hargrave.
Yvonne Hargrave. Home run shot by Howie. But you're right. They put a lot of assets into the defensive line, and they've only had really good defensive lines maybe twice. Fletcher Cox, to me, is a Hall of Fame player. Howie didn't draft him, Andy did. So it's just it's a blind spot. That said, Howie is a spectacular evaluator, I think, of offensive line talent, of all things.
Is that him or Stoutland?
Okay, whatever. I don't think it's him with anybody, but he has the final say.
Brought Stoutland in.
Yeah, God bless him. Bring Stoutland in. Jim Schwartz, if you want to. Okay. Jim Schwartz kind of operated autonomously, So yeah, I believe that. But they all get how he gets stamped with all of them. How he gets stamped with Carson, how he gets stamped with Jalen, right?
Okay.
He's been really good at evaluating offensive line and tight ends. You know,
Yeah,
he's
that
got two really
organization
good
has
tight ends
always been good at
outside
tight
of the
end.
first round. So he has his strengths and his weaknesses, you know, and we kind of all do. The reason, you know, Ron Wolf and Tom Donahoe didn't, you know, general manage the Packers and the Steelers to their deaths is because they weren't perfect either. You know, Ozzie Newsome, you know, some of everybody has a blind spot. Everybody has a weakness. How he does, and you know, I don't mean to damn him with faint praise or perpetuate the stereotype. How he does spectacularly well for a guy who never played football.
Yeah, no.
You know, most of these guys.
He comes from the cap end of everything, and now he's in personnel. And to your point, Marcus, I mean, Darius Slay move was excellent. I mean, I think he does a really good job at pro personnel, finding guys like Gardner Johnson. I'll tell you what, as much as Bryce Huff looks like it's a bust, if this Zach Ball guy can play the way he plays, anything like that on a consistent basis, man, I think you cover that loss there, because this guy was a nobody with the Saints, and you found him on a roster. So I think he does a pretty good job of that. Look at Bradbury. I mean, whatever you want to say, he had a Pro Bowl year in 22. The Giants cut him. I mean, so he finds these guys in the pro side.
He's the guy that hired Jim Schwartz. He's the guy that hired Vic Fangio. You know, he's the guy that, you know, stumped for Brian Johnson, you know, the quarterback's coach that helped Jalen the first couple of years. So he's really good. And it's funny because we had one of those roundtable things at the Enquirer. People came in, they sat down, and it was Mike Sealski, my colleague, and I, and with the moderator. And the moderator, after we had a couple of questions, says, this was, I think, 2018, like the spring of 2018. So they said, have you ever written a column that you regretted writing, where it turned out you were dead wrong? I was like, yeah, last February I said fire Howie Roseman. And then the next January I was writing a column where, you know, touting him for executive of the year. But if you look at what happened in 2016, it was a tire fire.
Oh,
you know, they'd hired Doug Peterson, who was a kind of a disaster. They'd eaten all this money from Sam Bradford and Chase Daniel. It was just kind of a mess, right? And then a year later, Nick Foles is signed for ungodly money for a guy who's never been very good as a backup. And I was just totally proven wrong. So I've been very invested and involved in the addition of Howie Roseman, 22 years ago, and his maturation. I was very close to Joe Banner, who always thought that Howie was going to be great. And one of the things that Joe Banner did was he consistently hired people who he thought could take his job. He would never hire anybody who he didn't think would one day be good enough to do his job. He only hired the absolute best people. And that's why the Eagles have such a strong foundation, because Joe was very, very secure in himself and understood that the best way to build any organization is to hire the best people, even if those people might usurp you one day. And that's exactly what happened. That said, Howie's really, really good at his job. He's not perfect. He's not the perfect representative for the team. You know, he's sensitive to things. He kind of flies off the handle sometimes. And he's not beloved in the league, but he's good at his job.
What do you see this weekend? Buccaneers, and now here, check this crew out. Paris Campbell, Jahan Dotson, Johnny Wilson, and you got Goddard, you got Barkley. You're going to be going in against Todd Bowles. Now
you don't even have Britton. You don't even have Britton Covey.
You don't even have Britton Covey. That's right. I mean, you're going. I'll tell you what this does do, though, Marcus. This puts us back in that conversation at the beginning of the interview, where you go like this. Hey, Mahomes and Allen, you know, they don't need guys around them to win ball games. Isn't this kind of like a, hey, Jalen, you know, this is why you're the guy here, too. You're not going to have all your security blankets. I thought he was great in the fourth quarter against the Saints. Now you're going to need 60 minutes of that. I could come out of this game this weekend if they pull a win off, Marcus, going like this about Hurts. Hey, man, this guy had nobody out there. And he went out there, and just like with Bush up in Buffalo, or you have Kelsey in Kansas City, what have you, Rashid Rice. This guy went out there with limited talent and won.
I got to tell
That's
you,
a good coach.
I got to tell you, for me, it's a referendum on Kellen more than anybody else.
Okay.
Because Jalen in 2020, after the 2021 season, 2022 playoffs, and last year in Tampa, he was just embarrassed by Todd Bowles. Like he like you could
Totally.
you could almost see him in tears. And Todd, he was here for a bit. He was like the defensive coordinator after they got rid of Juan Castillo, I think, that year, crazy year. He was here for a bit, and I got to know him a little bit. He is an absolute killer. He has no mercy. He is incredibly detailed, and if he has the personnel, he's going to tear you up. This, to me, is a referendum game for Kellen because he doesn't have those weapons. He has to understand. He has to know what he can ask his offense to do. The other thing about this, you asked me in general what I think about this weekend. They're going to get about 4 inches of rain, including Sunday.
Game.
Because the Hurricane Helene is making landfall, I think, tonight. And they're not going to get the storm surge predicted for like Tallahassee, but Tampa's going to be really, really wet Sunday afternoon. And it's going to rain another inch Sunday. That's the forecast anyway. So if the ball's in the air a lot, if Jalen's in the backfield a lot, it's going to be a quagmire. It's going to be a heavy ball. You're going to be throwing it to guys who aren't used to catching, period, certainly not used to catching heavy balls. And I just think it's going to have to be like a 15-12 win if the Eagles win. And if Jalen has a couple more turnovers, I see it being like 25-10 Tampa Bay. It's going to be a close Eagles win or a Tampa Bay semi-blowout because, but your guy Baker Mayfield, he understands how to not lose games. I'm not sure Jalen understands that yet.
Can I sneak one more in on you?
Sure, yeah.
Have you been surprised by Saquon Barkley? Because for me, Marcus, he never lived up to being the second pick when he was in New York. I know the circumstances. Dave Gettleman was a train wreck. Joe Schoen doesn't look like he's any better right now. They've never had but one offensive lineman at any time. Daniel Jones, buyer's regret already with that thing. So, man, I'll tell you something. I don't know if he can handle the workload that he has right now. He's on pace for 400 carries. But, boy, I'll tell you what, man. That guy is in my MVP top 5 for the league. I mean, you'd be hard-pressed to find anybody else that's playing better ball than him. Have you been surprised?
Astonished. Like I was a huge Barkley fan coming out of college. I thought he was going to be the next. And by the next, for me, it's like LaDainian Tomlinson or Marshall Faulk, but better, stronger, bigger, faster, whatever. I couldn't wait to see what he was going to do. And he got hurt. And we do a lot of Giants work. We'll go up to the Giants before the Giants game during the week. And, we'll go up to Giants games on the bye week and stuff. So we're pretty familiar with the Giants here in Philly. And their offensive lines have just been laughable. And one of their offensive linemen is on the Eagles practice squad now. And he was asked about Saquon. He's like, yeah, I can't wait to see what he does with a good offensive line. Now, this guy played like 17 games with Saquon. He was talking about himself. It was my favorite part of the preseason. He was like, yeah, those offensive linemen were horrible. Present company included. So I will say, like, it's remarkable how effective a guy like Saquon can be when he's running behind guys who know their business. Just being talented and getting to your guy or whatever is one thing. These offensive linemen really know their business. They block for like 6 or 7 seconds all the way through. Saquon is patient enough. He'll do that. He'll see the hole close. He'll cut back knowing the next hole is going to open. He's a really bright runner. He's shiftier than I thought he would be at this point in his career. He's more explosive than I thought he would be at this point of his career. And he's smarter than I thought he'd ever was, because I didn't see him play very often, and there just wasn't a lot there. So, yeah, I'm surprised he's this good, but I don't think he is. Like, he knew he was this good. If he gets through this season healthy, no matter what the numbers are, it probably will be the greatest season a running back has ever had as an Eagle. He is easily the most talented running back the Eagles have ever had. And he's only played 3 games.
Wow.
I mean, the things he does, like Ricky
More
is
than
probably second.
Shady. More than
Ricky
Shady.
Waters is probably second, right?
Ricky Waters, okay.
And LaShawn McCoy is probably third. But this guy does things Ricky could never do and LaShawn could never do. He does everything both of them can do, bigger, stronger, faster. And Ricky was great. Like, people forget how good Ricky was. Those
Fantastic
offensive
player.
lines were as bad as the Giants' offensive lines. And Ricky went to, I think, 2 Pro Bowls and was like Rodney Peete and Ty Detmer and were his quarterbacks. So Ricky was special, like really special. And he's better than LaShawn McCoy. And this guy is better than both of them.
Before you get out of here, I got to show you this because you do some work with the Giants. My uncle's this guy. Robistelli.
Is that right?
Yeah. This is his a Hall of Fame or Ring of Honor jersey
Right.
that they put up there for him. And when he passed away, it was passed down to me that I got Robistelli, one of the only MVPs. And he's the guy that introduced me to Chuck Bednarik. And what a kook that was, meeting Chuck Bednarik back in the day. One of the greatest fan bases I've ever worked in front of has to be this Philly fan base, because one day they're like this: hey, man, we love you to death. The next week it could be this. Hey, where are we going here?
Well, the thing about Philadelphia, and I'm a transplant. The thing about Philadelphia compared to other Northern New York. I grew up about 2 hours north of Syracuse. So I actually grew up, when I was a kid, I was a Cowboys fan because they're on TV all the time. But once I got to college, I didn't care. But the thing about this fan base is it's kind of like the Red Sox and Yankees.
Yes.
And in that, it's the only thing that matters to this fan base.
Yeah.
And they're never indifferent. They're never ambivalent. The Yankees and Red Sox fan bases are never. Phillies fan base gets ambivalent, indifferent. This fan base, there are only 3 fan bases that I can think of that are like this, totally invested year round, no matter what. It's the Red Sox, the Yankees, and the Eagles.
Yeah.
The Cowboys maybe, but Texas people are kind of weird.
Hey, those Bills fans are pretty nuts up there too about that.
They
team.
are, but if the team's not great,
okay,
they'll fade away.
Hide.
Right.
Okay.
But the fan base here in Philadelphia, it's more like a religion than any other football team I know. And it's the only 2 fan bases I've been able to compare it to are the Yankees, who had doldrums but still drew. Like, they built that stadium, I think, when the team wasn't great, right? And then and the Red Sox, who just draw. And it is a really, you get 70-year-old grandmas out there with the scorebook because they've been to all 81 games that year, and they're keeping score every inning. So yeah, it's a great fan base for you and me, especially doing this job. Spectacular fan base for me covering the Eagles, and totally invested and demanding, but also pretty pretty appreciative, especially when the team has personality. They love personality. The Phillies had the 5th or 6th highest highest attendance in their history, and they haven't won anything because the fan base likes the players. And I think that says something about the fan base. You have to pay attention to be affectionate.
You think this fan base has more appreciation for Gang Green or that 17 Super Bowl when you talk about personalities? Because Reggie White, Jerome Brown, Seth Joyner.
Personality-wise, by far Gang Green. By far Gang Green, personality-wise. They love the fact that they won, and they appreciate. Well, if you polled,
but they remember that Gang Green more, right?
Right. If you polled fans right now, they would tell you Buddy Ryan's a better coach than Doug Peterson. It's a sickness, but it is what it is,
I love it. Marcus, thank you so much for spending so much time with me, man. I had so much fun, man. I hope we get a chance to do this again. I love reading your stuff, and I say this about you too. You have the fearless pen. So I appreciate this so much. Thank you again. I hope we can do it again, my friend.
All right. Let me know. I'm at your service.
Thank you so much. Marcus Hayes from the Philadelphia Inquirer. I absolutely love that. That was fantastic. Hit the like button. By the way, we say this to you guys with Wes Hopkins. Absolutely. Absolutely. Look at I'm awake. Are you? Wow. A good segment. What's that mean? Don't forget our friends at BetUS. You're looking for a new betting house. BetUS is your place. BetUS is your one-stop place during this football season, especially like tonight. Our good friends at BetUS have teamed up here with us here at JAKIB to give you an opportunity this year to have one of the absolute best times. Our YouTube 150. Let's get this. YouTube 150 up to 150%, up to 2K that you can put a deposit down on, 200% in crypto bonuses. Also, your second and third are 125% bonuses there for you when it comes to going up and getting yourself some great bets here like tonight, Cowboys and Giants. Like Canes play tomorrow, college football on Saturday, pro football on Sundays. BetUS.com.pa. That's BetUS.com.pa. Fastest payouts in the business. 24/7 personalized service, 365 days of the year. Live wagering on all major games. BetUS.com. That .pa. BetUS.com.pa. And do me a favor, you tell them Big Sil sent you.
He's blocked well and tries to cut.